Okay, so you know how you always hear from the media that it's racist to ask for IDs to vote. Currently in New York, you do not need an ID to vote. And we talk to white people at universities. As you'll see in this first video, it's Berkeley. He stops white people. He asks them if it's racist to ask for IDs for voting, and they say, of course it's racist because black people, I guess, don't know how to use the internet or find the DMV or have IDs. And then he goes and asks black people, and of course they know how to get to the DMV, they know how to use the internet, and they don't mind showing their ID to vote. So the question is, why would Democrats push the narrative that it is racist to ask for an ID to vote? And the second video is the Democratic New York voting commissioner getting secretly recorded by a hot girl. And he sort of just spills the beans. He says that Democrats bus people around to vote. And kind of pisses him off, to be honest, he says. I'll let the two videos speak for themselves. But just so next time you hear that asking for an ID to vote is racist, you'll know that it's not racist. And it's more racist to say that black people don't know how to use the internet. Right? Or black people don't have IDs as much as white people. And you'll know why the narrative exists because of video number 2, Project Veritas.
I'm Ami Horowitz, and I'm here in Berkeley, California to find out if voter ID laws suppress the black vote. Do you have an opinion on voter ID laws?
Yeah, they're usually pretty racist and they're bad.
I think voter ID laws are a way to perpetuate racism.
Would you go as far as say those laws are racist?
For sure.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely.
Tell us how.
Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
You can always get IDs if you do over the internet. Does that also make it difficult for black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think that's harder for black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
A lot of people have smartphones, but you might not have data.
For most of the communities, they don't really know what is out there just because they're not aware or they're not informed.
I also think there's a repression of black voting with how if you're a convicted felon, you're not allowed to vote and everything. And when you look at swing states like Florida, that's a huge population of the African Americans.
Now I'm here in East Harlem to ask black people their thoughts on what you just heard. Do you have ID normally? You carry ID around?
Yes, I have state ID.
Do you carry ID?
Yes, I do.
Do you know any black person who doesn't carry ID?
No. Everyone that I know has an ID. Why would they think we don't have ID?
That's a lie. Why would they say that?
Do you have ID?
Yes.
Because I have my ID and my friends have their ID, so we know what we need to carry around.
Everybody that I know have ID. That's one of the things you need to walk around with New York with, ID.
Do you know any black adult who does not have ID?
No, I don't.
Is it a weird thing to even say that?
Yes, it is.
What is this, some type of trick candy cameras?
I know, right? That's the only thing I brought with me.
Those are legit IDs. I heard a lot also that black people can't figure out how to get to the DMV.
Really?
What does that say to you?
I know it's that, on 25th Street.
Do you know where the DMV is around you?
It's on 125th Street and 3rd Avenue, I believe.
You know how to get there?
Yeah.
Would you have a problem getting there if you had to get there?
No.
I know these sound like silly questions. You know how to get to the DMV?
Of course.
You know where it is?
Yes.
You can get there?
Uh-huh.
No problem.
No problem.
Just checking.
Okay.
And I also heard a lot that black people, especially poor black people, have no access to the internet, can't figure out how to use the internet.
That's just stupidity, honestly. Everybody has access to the internet. Even a little kid can figure out how to work the internet.
I had access to the internet for years.
You know how to use it properly, right?
Exactly. I do it at work. So, of course, I know how to use it. My kids know how to use it. They all have iPads, iPods, whatever.
Your phone has data? You can actually
Unlimited.
Unlimited data.
I use my phone as a hotspot.
What does that say to you for the people who have this perception of black people?
They're pretty much ignorant. That's what my thought process was.
I just think that's ignorant.
Ignorant. That's the word I'm
Very,
hearing
very
a lot.
ignorant.
Ignorant.
Very, very ignorant.
Does it sound racist for somebody to say that?
I think it is a little racist because, you know, you're putting people in a category and you have no idea what you're talking about.
Maybe a little bit of racist in it, but like I said, I think it's more stupidity and ignorance.
Judging somebody, like, but you're judging them because they black, saying that they don't got it.
What people are they talking to? Who are these people talking to?
Do you have a problem that if you go to vote and they say, "Can we please see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are?" Are you
Love
cool?
showing my ID.
You got no problem with that?
Nope.
Would you have a problem if when you go to vote, if they say, "Can we please just see your ID to make sure you are who you say you are?" Do you have an issue with that?
No.
Would you have a problem if there was a rule where you had to show your ID in order to vote?
I don't think so. No.
Would you have an issue if there was a rule saying you got to show your ID before you vote?
Nah.
Are you cool with that?
Yeah.
Right. Like I say, people don't realize certain neighborhoods in particular, they bust people around to vote.
They do what?
They bust them around. They put them in a bus and they move the poll site to poll site.
Like what kind of neighborhoods?
Oh, I don't want to say.
Oh, like minority neighborhoods, like black neighborhoods and Hispanic neighborhoods?
And Chinese too.
Oh. Why do they do that? Just to get like more votes for Democrats or?
Almost themselves. They're all running for office.
Oh yeah, for like their candidates for when they're.
For the assembly, for whatever. They get buses, they move people around.
Well, New York doesn't have voter ID laws, right? New York?
No, you cannot ask.
They what?
They can't ask for voter ID.
Why's that? They can't?
The law. The law says you can't ask somebody, which they really should be able to do. You know, I don't think it's too much to ask somebody to show some kind of an ID.
Yeah, I mean, why not? I mean, you have to show an ID for everything else.
Right, to go into a building, you got to show them your ID.
Well, you're the commissioner, you said, of the Democratic Election Commissioner. So if you think there's voter fraud and you think there should be voter ID, why don't people listen to you? I mean...
Well, that's because the New York State Legislature makes the laws. I don't make the laws.
And you think there's a lot of absentee ballot fraud, too?
Oh, there's thousands of absentee ballots. I know where they came from.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, Hillary Clinton doesn't support voter ID laws. Like,
I know. That's why I'm not always crazy about everything the Democrats do either. Blasio just gave out ID cards.
He what?
He gave out ID cards to Blasio. You don't have, you know, that's in lieu of a driver's license, that you can use it for anything. Well, they didn't vet the people to see who they really are. Anybody could go in there and say, I'm Joe Smith, I want an ID card. It's absurd. You're going to see a lot of fraud, not just voter fraud, all kinds of fraud.
What a waste of taxpayer money.
That's why I'm getting more conservative as I get older.
Well, maybe you won't vote for Hillary. I don't know.
I would, but I have no choice.
Well, not only just like voter ID because of like voting twice, but like people can like cover their faces. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Well, the Muslims could do that too. You know who they are.
De Blasio wants to let them in New York.
He doesn't care. What does he care? Who's going to pay for it? You are. Your tax money.
The Muslims, yeah, especially like all those burqas. Like someone could claim, oh, it's my religion, but then you don't know if they're pretending or not.
Exactly. Your vote isn't really counting because they can go in there with a burqa on and you don't know if they're a voter.
You know what?
Yes. Your vote gets discounted because they come in with a burqa on it and they can vote. People think, you know, it's a liberal thing to do, but I take my vote seriously. And I don't don't want 10 other people coming in negating my vote by voting for the other candidate when they're not even registered voters.
Are you sure you're a Democrat?
Sometimes, no.
Are you sure you're a Democrat?
I'm only telling you this.
There you have it. Plain as day. The daylight that's still out, just barely. So, black people think it's retarded that white people think that they don't have IDs. Okay? Dum-dums. Or just people repeating their party rhetoric because they really know what's going on in the background. See, like, this is, I mean, you got like Stephen Colbert, all these other jackasses trying to fight Trump on this, mailing out all these ballots, right? And Trump's like, there's fraud. And then Twitter checks him or whatever. And then Trump is like, now you gonna get sued by everybody, bitch. Yeah, I mean, wow. I mean, this is corruption. And fraud. So some corruption and some fraud. Motherfucker. I mean, it was just like plain as day. Plain as day. De Blasio doesn't want voter IDs. Why? Because he knows that his constituents are going to bus people around and vote many, many, many times. It kind of reminds me of that. Oh, it's a great movie like Streets of New York, when the Irish mayor was like, vote early, vote often. Do your civic duty. Vote early, vote often. And that's what the Democrats want. They want to harvest ballots from mailboxes. They want to bus people around towns that don't ask for IDs for voting, and they want them to vote early and vote often. Yeah. Black people have IDs too. Because you need an ID to do anything. I mean, even if all you think like black people do is collect unemployment, which is a racist thing to think, they still needed an ID to get there. Like, I don't care if you're working, you're not working, you play video games and live with your mom. Fuck, man, you have an ID. Fuck, who doesn't have a fucking ID?